Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly MMA Cycles Market Update. This is Gianni DePoci, your host, and I'm joined this week by a very special guest, our good friend, Rob Kerrigan from down in Australia. Good morning, Rob. How are you doing today?
Hey, Gianni, good to be with you. Thanks so much for the invite. Yeah, lovely to be joining you and on all the listeners today.
Very good. So, Rob, you are a very special friend of MMA Cycles. You're one of the original students of the Merriman Market Timing Academy. So why don't you tell us a little bit on how you found Ray and about your background as well?
Oh, look, thank you, Gianni. Look, a pleasure. Fortunately, my wife and I have been in our own business for 26 years, and it's been relatively successful for us. We've got 3 troops, one of them still at home, 2 of them out now. And my wife and I worked together all those years. And I guess my interest in the markets came from my dad. I've got a farming, agricultural background, grew up on the land. Dad diversified some of the income and put that into the share market at different times. And I always used to enjoy his chats, listen to his, he at least loved reading the paper back then. And I'd listen to what he had to say. And, from there just developed our own interests. And we started managing our own money just a little bit after we got into our own business about 2000. And I just sort of, focused on the ASX market, something local to us for, 4 or 5 years. And I guess sort of developed a system there. And then someone said, why don't you jump in and do something with futures? So I did that from, 2005 to about 2019. And as I said before, you just get a little bit tired, as well as keeping our other, interests going, of course, in the longer term plans. You just get a little bit tired, up late, early mornings, and running a business, it was just a bit difficult. And then my focus now is on the leverage ETFs, and I know you love those markets. Oh yeah, and they're awesome. Just awesome, aren't they? You can get leverage, but you haven't got the extreme volatility, and you haven't got to be watching your position, at different times, so you're a little bit more relaxed. But mate, my contact with Ray, it's just awesome. What a wonderful person, that I found Ray to be, and I know you have the same, and thousands of people around the financial markets and astrology in general have benefited from Ray's experience over the years. And I met Ray, went to subscribe to his stocks report in 2005 for the first time. I met him in 2006. And then just got into all the reports, read everything. And look, I still read everything a couple of times to where we are, today. And Gianni chatting with you. So saying, look, I love it. And it's been something that I've been, really very fortunate to be a part of for those years.
Very good. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your story. What I want to do now, Rob, like we do every week, is go ahead and review some market behavior. It was pretty volatile week. We had, in terms of an exact aspect, the only signature we had this past week was Mars square Jupiter. That was on the 23rd of May. And of course, that ties into the whole T-square going on right now between Jupiter, Mars, and Pluto. Jupiter at the apex, Mars and Pluto in opposition, squaring Jupiter. And it looks like, we could have formed a pretty important low here in the Dow. So I think stocks are looking pretty good right now. We'll see how we finish the month. Usually the saying is sell in May and go away. But I'm thinking this year, Rob, it might be buy in May and stay. So what are you thinking about what's going on in the Dow Jones right now?
Yeah, look, I think you called it, Gianni, really well here in the report. Half cycle, half promise cycled, contracted, and look, it certainly looks like it wants to rally, doesn't it? Where we are here now. Yeah. And in terms of, how the NASDAQ performed overnight, I mean, someone came out and said that they were going to make a fortune in AI again, of course, and the market's leapt overnight. Look at that. Wow. And again, you called it, the report, you called it to a T when you said the breakout was coming with Uranus. And that's just that's classic, isn't it? That is absolutely classic financial astrology. And I know you love your breakouts. And there you go. What a trade that was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's looking good. But, Rob, from a geocosmic standpoint, something we've been talking about really for the last, I would say close to a year, was tech really started to do better once Saturn left the sign of Aquarius. Yeah. And ever since since Saturn's been in the sign of Pisces, we've seen the burden of Saturn relieved from the tech sector, and still dealing with some headwinds in the space. But this whole artificial intelligence thing, as you brought up, I think it ties into Pluto and Aquarius, and looking a few years ahead, Uranus eventually going into Gemini. So any take on those signatures, or even the T-square going on right now for that matter?
Yeah, well, Gianni, it's all supportive of the market accelerating, isn't it? All supportive of the market accelerating. You look at Microsoft. Wow, everyone would have been scratching their head and thinking, should I buy it at 225?
Right.
Here when it sort of pulled back, and now what is it? Well, I don't know what it closed at today, but well over 300.
332.
And you're thinking, wow, what an awesome trade that would have been. There it was. 225. I think. That little see it just come back and retested that low. And then it just sort of went from there. Yeah. So look, I know you like your stocks in conjunction with what you're doing with the indexes, and of course, a number of those stocks have cycles within them as well, and that's something that we do a little bit of work here in the Aussie market with some of the bigger, industrials and the banks and the utilities. They often have cycles in cycles too.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Rob, because I did want to look at the Australian All Ordinaries composite with you, since you're in Australia, and we do have a lot of readers and viewers in Australia as well. So, one of the things we talked about in the daily report, and a lot of times we see these reversals culminate in stock markets across the world. We were dropping into this week. We rallied here on Friday. We don't have the closing price for the ASX yet on Friday, but we were falling into a hard aspect between the Sun and Saturn this Sunday. And a lot of times when you see hard aspects with Saturn, a market falling into that signature, you can see a reversal. But next week, the only real signature we have worth paying attention to, I think, is Venus trine Neptune on June 2nd. So, Australian market, really interesting stuff. It's kind of been range bound ever since booming into early 2022. It looks like it bottomed. Well, it did bottom a few months before the U.S. market, and that's an intermarket bullish divergence signal. So it looks pretty good. So what's your take on the ground and what's going on in the Australian share market?
Well, Gianni, look, you look at the Aussie market, and look, it looks as though that there's more money coming into the Aussie market. There's some positivity around. We've had a big increase in interest rates, of course, like everyone has, but we're still a percentage point behind the US. So, in terms of the base rate, the cash rate, so I suspect that that our Reserve Bank are going to have to do something a little more closely aligned with what's happening in the US. I mean, inflation is still not coming down yet for us. We've seen wages growth at about 3.5%, which is the biggest wages growth we've seen, nationally in our economy for years and years. So that's all positive. So everyone's still spending money. So you got to think that that's going to filter into the markets. Everyone's still buying their brunches and their lunches and their I mean, I don't know what's happened in the US, but Mother's Day was here the other week, and you couldn't get a seat at breakfast time around the cafes and the restaurants. And that to me is an indicator people are still happy to spend, as much as there are members of our community that are struggling because of the interest rates. But again, there's a lot of fixed interest tied into our residential REITs, our residential property market that will start to unfold about November.
Wow.
So we'll see that. So potentially, look, there could be a belt tightening then, but I think the Aussie market looks really positive. And Gianni, if you have a look at, that was a dead set buy, that double bottom in the Aussie market, the ASX, classic, wasn't it? Look at this, absolute classic in here. And you go down and have a look at the stochastic, or the RSO as you recall it. A little divergence, a little double loop back there around the time of, September. Beautiful that was. So, look, again, you just got to stay connected with the content that you and Ray have and apply it. And you've just got to be patient, sit on your hands at different times. But Gianni, wonderful.
Yeah, well, you're saying the right things, because there's a time to act, there's a time to do nothing. There's that song, "No one to hold them, no one to fold them, no one to walk away, no one to run." So, but I brought up the Australian dollar here because, you're talking about interest rates going up potentially in Australia some more. And, you're saying how the Central Bank of Australia is a little bit behind the Fed right now, and you kind of see that in the currency rate right here, because we are in a downtrend, a corrective downtrend here. So it would be interesting to see what's going to unfold on that front. I'm going to pivot here and pull up a 10-year Treasury yield chart, because this past week we had some really key economic data in the U.S. We had jobs numbers come in stronger than expected. We had a GDP, the Q1 GDP revised higher, and then we had inflation report on Friday come in higher than expected as well. So, a couple weeks back, markets in the U.S. were pricing in a rate cut as soon as July. Then it got pushed back to September. And now we're looking like we're going to have another rate hike again in June. So that was quite the farce, the pivot. But keep in mind that a lot of those discussions were unfolding while Mercury was retrograde. And we cautioned our readers, don't drink the Kool-Aid just yet. There's mixed messaging from the central bankers right now. This inflation thing isn't over. But I think with Jupiter and Taurus, we could see some extremes here. Could see, a skyrocketing interest rate environment followed by a pretty nasty crash. So that's what I'm seeing on the interest rate front. And I do want to take a look at gold and then crude oil, because I know those are pretty important commodities in the Australian economy. So what's your take on what's going on in the gold market? We obviously closed down a little bit this week and are coming off a triple top formation.
Yeah. Well, Gianni, look, I know Ray has been, bullish gold, and you and he have been sort of talking a lot about that in the reports. And I know that was discussion in the cycles program that we had just recently. You've got to think that, gold is going to rally from here. There's absolutely potential for it, isn't it? It's made higher highs. And I know, look, potentially there's a triple top in there, isn't there, that we've just seen recently. Yeah. But there's every reason for, money still to be tucked away safely in gold at this particular point in time, with inflation going to continue to run. I mean, I don't know how. The only way they're going to get inflation down is they've got to keep on hiking rates, or they've got to, wait for, they say it takes about 12 months, doesn't it, for that sort of to flow out into people's sort of, and a company's sort of balance, spending. Yeah. So maybe it's going to take a little longer to wash out, but you've got to think that gold is going to continue to maintain some strength.
Yeah, I'm looking for a higher low to form here soon. I think the more time gold spends, basically above 1900, I think that's a good sign.
And Gianni, I think as long as it stays above 1800, if it stays anywhere above 1800, then I think we've got a half cycle coming in there that's an absolute buy.
Yeah. Let's talk about crude oil, and then we can bring up Bitcoin. So crude oil, I think the big story here, Rob, is potential for a intermediate term cycle low. Obviously, Saturn going into Pisces, there's been some production cuts from OPEC. But, with this whole inflation thing persisting, it's really surprising that crude oil is over a year off of its multi-year high from March of 2020. So, this was a big reason why we didn't fully buy into the inflation is over story, because we knew we were in the time band for a low. And, we have that Jupiter Saturn sextile. I believe it's on June 13th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right.
June 19th. Jupiter's in the sign of Taurus, Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Pisces and Taurus are very important signs when it comes to commodity markets. Taurus ruling grain markets, Pisces ruling energy markets. So I think there's a big story unfolding here. As what you're telling me about this inflation stuff, I think there's something brewing under the surface. So what's your take on the energy market right now?
Yeah, I think, Gianni, you're absolutely right. I think there's plenty of support in oil. And, again, we're looking for a major 3-year low, isn't it, in oil?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there was some divergence too, wasn't there, in relation to the ETFs and the market
USO
itself.
USO.
So that's an indicator. Now, mind you, it's shot a little bit out of the gate. We just needed to get above 84, and then I think we can have confirmation that cycle's in, and then we're going to look to buy, pullbacks from there. I mean, and then Gianni, once it gets past $90, well, there's no stopping it to keep running, certainly closer towards 110, 120 perhaps. There's a bearish crossover zone, as you know, up there somewhere. I just haven't got the number in front of me, but that might form some formidable resistance at some point. But if it gets past that, well, look, I think it can continue.
Very good. Last and certainly not least, let's talk about Bitcoin. What's the sentiment in Australia over Bitcoin?
Gianni, look, I mean, you're the master of Bitcoin. There's no question about that. I mean, yourself and Ray, you just call this to the T all the time. I'm a chicken. I haven't ventured into the Bitcoin market too much yet. I mean, I can't speak out of school. So no, look, you need to lead the class on this. But I know, Jupiter plays a part in Bitcoin, doesn't it? You and Ray have discovered that, and others. So, I mean, what do you think? I mean, do you think it can get back above 31?
Well, I think we're early enough in the 4-year cycle that bottomed back in November. To where that type of outlook is still in the cards. My concern, Rob, is once Jupiter gets closer to that conjunction with Uranus in April 2024, what is that going to look like for Bitcoin? Do we get some sort of climactic crest and then a crash lower, or do we just accelerate and go on to make a new all-time high? I'm not exactly in the camp that we make a new all-time high in Bitcoin anytime soon, Rob, because we know we're in the late stage of the transit of Uranus through the sign of Taurus. So I think we're closer to the bust portion of the boom bust cycle than we are to the boom for crypto. So that's how I'm seeing this market right now. I think there's some short-term trading opportunities, and we talk about those in the crypto reports. On a daily and weekly basis. There's also a Bitcoin ETF that we track in the ETF report as well. So Rob, thank you so much for joining me. That's all the time that we had for today.
Awesome,
any last words or anything else on your radar regarding geocosmics markets? Anything else you want to say in closing?
Well, Gianni, look, I mean, I'm keeping a real close eye on the Mars-Uranus square, and then Neptune retrograde coming in at the end of June. I mean, there's a critical reversal date coming in there, and then of course we've got the Saturn retrograde and the Sun-Neptune square. I think that are sort of back to back. So you've got to think that that's going to create some opportunities. We've just got to keep our ear to the ground and keep awake to what could potentially happen. And Gianni, can't wait to get over and see you. I've got my scarf ready for the flight. MMTA 3 course 2, bring it on.
Yeah, it's going to be next weekend from June 1st to June 4th in Troy, Michigan. Rob's coming in all the way from Australia. We have another individual coming from Australia as well, but people from all over the world coming in. We're excited to host this conference. It's going to be great. We're going to combine course 2 with an investment retreat.
And Gianni, if I can just say, anyone who's out there who's sitting on the sidelines, look, you just can't. It's just an opportunity that's too good to miss, because what you and Ray will basically do in that session is lay out a plan for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of those longer term geocosmics and the planets working through the signs. It's just awesome. So look, book your tickets and get set for a great 3 days.
Fantastic. So details can be found at www.mmacycles.com. The last announcement that I have for this week is that the monthly grains report and the monthly plus addendum report written by Wyatt Fellows and Puyan Zulfargania, respectively, will be issued next week. So you can find those excellent reports at www.mmacycles.com. So thanks again, everyone, for watching. Rob, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Gianni. Awesome.